So hi, my name's Gordon Young. I'm the curator and the trainer for the Institute of Applied Psychology for the Diploma of Clinical Hypnosis and Strategic Psychotherapy. I'm also the person who created something called the Gordian Pillars of Psychotherapy. This is the underpinning form of psychotherapy we teach in the diploma. So let me introduce to you the Gordian Pillars. So why is it worth learning? Why would you do this? The first thing is that hypnosis isn't a therapy by itself. Hypnosis is a vehicle for getting someone into a trance state, and then you have to deliver some sort of message that's going to facilitate change in behavior or thinking for the client. That message has to be based on something, has to be based on an approach, some sort of applicable psychotherapy that is going to lead the client to better decision making, better cognitive functioning, better risk assessment, better decision making. So I'm going to say this part, the Gordian Pillars, are part of what makes this hypnosis training the most advanced training in Australia. As I said, hypnosis is only a vehicle. Hypnosis doesn't cure anything by itself. You've got to say something useful once you get them in trance. We use the Gordian therapy, which is based on the Gordian Pillars, because it's a simple unifying approach to all psychological distress. We can basically assess virtually all psychological distress with a unifying pattern. So it is an integrative approach. And all 5 approaches that support this Gordian therapy are all very well researched, empirically very strong. So cognitive behavioral therapy right now is still considered the gold standard in therapy. We use a lot of their material in Gordian therapy. There's something called metacognition, not as well known in Australia, but it's really about the underpinning thoughts that people have that get them in trouble, the mistakes they make in their interpretation of the world. Strategic psychotherapy, down here in the blue, is where we're going to be proactive and we're going to lead the client to insight. We're going to lead the client to different possible solutions. So we're not going to wait for the client to hit their insight by themselves. We're going to lead them there, because ideally, as a therapist, we should know where the problem is and we should know where the solution is. That leads us to solution-focused brief therapy. So this is very much a focus on the future. Where are you now? Where do you want to be? What's the gap and what's holding you back? So whereas a lot of therapeutic models will focus on the past, trying to explain the past, this is why you're like this, there's childhood trauma, you had a controlling mother, that type of thing. Our approach is very much more about, it doesn't really matter what your past has been. We can all do anxiety, we can all get depressed at times, we can all get scared of things, we can all get a bit obsessive. We all might have a little bit of an addiction to something at times. Maybe it's not problematic, but we're capable of that behavior. The question is, where are you now and where do you want to go? So we help the client come to secure a better future. Clients don't come to us looking to improve their past. They come looking for a future. How are we going to provide that for them? If they don't know where to go or how to get out of their own way, then we have to provide the antidote to that. We have to show them the path. And the type of hypnosis we're going to run is something called modern or Ericksonian or permissive hypnosis. Most schools will teach you traditional hypnosis, which is also known as authoritarian hypnosis. very much about telling people what to do, often very scripted. So you would read a script for every different type of condition. You might, if as a traditional hypnotherapist, you might have 4 or 5 scripts per condition, and you just choose one to read to a client. We're never going to do that. Ericksonian hypnosis is very much about interviewing the client and then delivering back something based on that interview, where we're going to use their language. We've heard and we've assessed what's blocking them, and we're going to go after those specific blocks. If you think about it, by definition, that's a much more effective way of dealing with the world. You know, how often does a scripted approach work for you? Ever heard someone try to sell you something online with a scripted approach? At times it works fine, and other times it really falls over very quickly. So all of Gordian therapy integrates all of this, and it's all very well researched. The key here is it's a simple framework, it's evidence-based, but it's easy to learn. That's really important when you're a novice, because we expect you to be coming in with nothing. We expect you might be coming from corporate, from engineering, from IT, from some other area that isn't necessarily people-based. We also have a lot of therapists that come in, but they're still not familiar with this. Psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors have never heard of this stuff either. So everyone's at the same sort of basic level when it comes to this. This is what I call my fundamental 5. They are true for every single psychological form of distress that you can name. The underpinning foundation, the key element, is called the external locus control. That means that the person, typically the client, doesn't feel like they're in control of their own thoughts or feelings. In fact, that's what brings them into clinic, is they want you to help them get back control. They think external circumstances or other people are deciding their mood and perspective for them. We have to put them back in control. And the way we do that is teach them different methods, different devices, cognitive devices, to choose which thoughts and feelings they listen to and separate those from the thoughts and feelings that they should probably ignore. Every one of us has an enormous number of thoughts and feelings we'll have in a day that are of limited value. Don't care how smart you are, you're still capable of thinking some pretty dumbass stuff. So we want to give the client a better skill set in deciding, no, that's not useful. I'm not listening to that right now. I'm focusing on this. And one way we do it is we help them recognize how they drive themselves into a problem. And that's part of GICA, G-I-C-A. Global thinking is a starting point. They think anxiety is something that happens to them, when in fact, anxiety is a verb. It's not a noun. You have to do it to yourself. You have to imagine certain things in the future. You can't be anxious without going to the future, even if it's the very near future. You have to hold certain tension. You have to breathe in a shallow way. You have to tell yourself you're not going to be able to cope with this. You have to catastrophize. Ironically, most research suggests that roughly 90% of things that people worry about never happen. So it's a complete waste of time. And then another 5%, they do happen. You know, the meeting did go poorly, but it didn't happen as catastrophically as people imagine. So we want to teach the client how to choose which thoughts and feelings are useful and what aren't. When you tell yourself things like, I'm an anxious person, or I have an addictive personality, or I'm not good enough, these are globalizations that drive behavior and thinking and interpretations about yourself. It's very hard for you to rise above it when you're giving yourself such limitations. The I of GICA refers to internal orientation. That means you cannot really have a psychological form of distress without being in your head and in your feelings. If your attention's more external to you on the outside world, that gives you a reality check. But typically, the outside world is nowhere near as dangerous as the inside world. There's more dangers internally when you can imagine pretty well anything happening. Our imagination leads most of our stresses. And someone wise once said that imagined problems really only need imagined solutions. So we're going to teach them how to imagine something different. The C of GICA is ineffective compartmentalization. That basically means teaching them how to turn off a thought or feeling, to park it, to maybe be able to step back and say, is this thought or feeling valid? Which it might be. You were wronged. The second question is then, is it useful? Not as many thoughts or feelings get through that second question. Something could be valid and still not very useful. And so be able to teach the client to be able to step back from all that and ask yourself, what do I want out of this situation? Do I want to punish people, or do I want to secure a guarantee that that behavior won't happen again? What do I need out of this communication I'm about to enter into? And then the A of GICA is a low tolerance for ambiguity. So what that really means is all anxiety-based issues require you to be uncomfortable with what the unknowns. You want to make sure that you can predict things because the unknowns are dangerous. That is a distortion of the real world. Just because you don't know what's going to happen doesn't make it bad. But anyone who's running anxiety does think that way. They have something called a negative expectancy. They expect things to go pear-shaped. And so we've got to teach the client how to make a better risk assessment. Can things go pear-shaped? Yeah. But what's the most likely situation? The worst case scenario is not the most likely case scenario. So when you constantly go back over the worst case scenario, the catastrophe, you're living one catastrophe after another, and none of it actually ever happened. This is the fast track to anxiety. And there was a time in my life where I did anxiety at an Olympic level. I know how to do it. I had to learn how to not do it. And then it led me down this pathway. So this fundamental 5 is true for virtually all psychological distress, which means you've got a ready-made formula to deal with most things. Now, this model doesn't include individual beliefs, what you're particularly scared of and things like that, which you're also going to have to address in the hypnotic treatment plan. But you've got a really solid base of tackling each of these pillars in the first few sessions so you can get some momentum. This is a very unique form of therapy. And then when you go to the different conditions, there are these ancillary pillars that we tack on. So there's the fundamental 5 through the middle. And then when someone's anxious, they typically also run coping mechanisms, avoidance. That might be things like drinking excessively, smoking, doing drugs, binge eating, something that deals with the discomfort of the problem without actually dealing with the problem. That will typically amplify problems. And then on this side of the equation, it's about the future. So anxiety is future-based. Addictions, compulsions, impulses are present-oriented, and depression tends to be past-oriented. So future orientation with a negative expectancy, it must be a negative expectancy or you cannot do anxiety. If you have a positive expectancy, like I don't know what's going to happen, but it could be good, you can't do anxiety to that. That's just not going to work. So this is the combination for anxiety. Now you know you've got 3 or 4 sessions right here to tackle. Now, how you tackle each one is going to alter a little bit based on the client. You can tailor the way you respond to all of it according to the client. Bit hard to explain in a brief therapy video like this, but you'll learn how to do that for best effect. So why do Gordian therapy? Well, it's the fastest way to take you from novice to effective therapist. I'm not the only one who thinks that. I've had psychologists say in class, why weren't we taught this at university? And of course, the answer is it wasn't available. It also moves you away from the story. You're listening out for the patterns that the client is running. Because if you get caught in someone's story about what he said and she said and all the rest of it, you can end up being really confused about what you are going to do as an intervention. So when you're listening out for the patterns of thinking that are revealed in the story, then it's much easier to get to the solution. It's also not scripting, which has a poor result, poor efficacy. But it's a pattern you can rely on. If you're scripting, you will get poor results a percentage of the time. That these days can translate into complaints, poor Google reviews, and loss of career trajectory. Because the short answer is you can't really become an effective therapist reading scripts. It's not really viable. Scripting has an inbuilt failure rate. And unless you're really good and you get really good reviews from people, you're never going to have a great career. You can eke out a living, definitely, but the way you do that is you're using the most sophisticated forms and structures that are available. When you show people these pillars like that, you show the client, they understand. Clients invariably say, I do all of those things. And then you're educating the client about what's going on for them. And then they buy into the work you're doing. So it's really important as a psychoeducation, that's what's called. You show them the set of pillars that are true for their particular condition. There are 14 of them. And then the client and you on the same page. The more the client understands why they got a problem, the better they do generally. A guy called Dr. Irving Kirsch out of Harvard School of Medicine did a meta-analysis on hypnosis, so a study of all the studies. And what he came to is the combination of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is one of the elements that we use, and hypnotherapy provided up to 70% better client outcomes than if you weren't using hypnosis at all. Now, CBT is considered the most effective therapy there is, and we can improve it by up to 70% simply by adding hypnosis. Well, this is effectively our model. So there's a difference between getting qualified as a clinical hypnotherapist and becoming a successful hypnotherapist. As I just said, unless you've got raving fans, you're going to have to market pretty hard to get enough clients. Raving fans refer you to other people. So you've got to get good outcomes. Also, if you don't get great outcomes and you're not convincing from the outset, you'll see a lot of clients once. They'll come for one session, they won't come back. A good therapist, they're coming back 4 or 6 sessions, and then they're referring other people to you. So your effectiveness, the effectiveness of the model you use, is really crucial to your success as a therapist. So a qualification does not secure a career. So many people we talk to say, I just want a qualification. It doesn't give you anything. Yes, you got access to a professional body and insurances, but you're going to mess with people's heads. If you don't really know what you're doing pretty thoroughly, then there's a danger you'll do harm and not good, and the client just won't come back. So effectiveness secures a career. So what do you need to do? Well, you need to compare what we're doing to other schools. We are nothing like any other school in the country. Gordian therapy is a significant, unique selling position for us. It gives us a skill set, which gives you a skill set that most people can't pick up in 16 days of live broadcast. The standards are 12 days with 16. I know that well because I'm the one who wrote the standards for the field. So when you're ready, call us, find out what you need, know what you need first, and then call us. And if we can even introduce you to sit in a class for a little bit, or point you in more direction to watch some videos or alike, then we'll do that, because we want you to make an informed decision before you come and train with us. We want you to know why you're doing it, and we want to make sure it's something you definitely want to do. All right, I hope that helps. I look forward to seeing you in class at some point soon.